The war room smelled of fear and desperation. Admiral Thane's 4 arms trembled as he reviewed the tactical reports for the 100th time. Every simulation ended the same way: complete failure. The Void Reapers had chosen their target well. Terminus Station sat deep within the Crimson Nebula, a hellish region of space that killed everything it touched. "Show me the casualty projections again," Thane ordered his aide. The holographic display painted a grim picture. Kalani forces would lose 70% of their troops within the first hour. Their advanced energy shields, pride of their civilization, simply melted under the nebula's corrosive assault. The Mortec cybernetic warriors fared even worse. Their enhanced bodies shut down completely when exposed to the electromagnetic storms that raged constantly through the red mists. Even the legendary Gortek, whose massive frames had conquered. 100 worlds refused to enter the nebula. Their war chief had been blunt during the emergency council meeting. "My warriors fear no enemy," he had growled through his translator, "but we will not throw our lives away in that cursed void." General Rivera sat quietly in the corner, watching the alien commanders argue. The human representative looked small compared to the towering figures around her, but she listened to every word. When Admiral Thane finally turned to her, his expression was apologetic. "General, I know humans are new to the Coalition, but we need options. Every military analyst agrees that Terminus Station cannot be held. Perhaps we should evacuate and establish a new defensive line further back." Rivera stood up slowly. Her voice was calm when she spoke. "What exactly makes the nebula so dangerous?" The question surprised Thane. "The corrosive gases eat through standard armor in minutes. The electromagnetic interference destroys most electronic systems. Gravitational anomalies can crush a battleship. The radiation levels would kill most species in hours, even with protection." "Most species," Rivera repeated thoughtfully. "Admiral, humanity has lived on worlds that would kill your people just as quickly. We've learned to adapt." "With respect, General, your technology is centuries behind ours. If our advanced systems cannot survive the nebula, how could yours?" Rivera smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Sometimes the simplest solutions work best. I have a unit that specializes in impossible missions. They've trained in environments that make the nebula look friendly." The Storm Riders had earned their reputation in the worst places humanity could find. Commander Alex Kane had led his team through the methane storms of Saturn's moon Titan, where winds moved faster than bullets and the cold could freeze steel solid in seconds. They had fought pirates in the asteroid belt, where one wrong move meant drifting forever in the void. They had survived the surface of Venus, where the air was poison and the ground could melt lead. Kane studied the mission briefing in his Spartan quarters aboard the transport ship Defiant. The nebula data looked challenging, but not impossible. He had seen worse. His team had survived worse. Sergeant Torres knocked on his door. The demolitions expert had scars covering half her face from their last mission on Europa. "Sir, the alien observers want to inspect our equipment. They seem confused by our gear." Kane could understand why. Where alien soldiers carried energy weapons powered by fusion cells, the Storm Riders preferred simple projectile weapons that could function in any environment. Their armor was thick metal plates instead of energy shields. Their communications relied on basic radio instead of quantum networks. The aliens saw primitive equipment. Kane saw reliability. Lieutenant Davis joined them in the corridor. The reconnaissance specialist had been studying the station layouts. "Commander, I found something interesting. The Reapers are using advanced infiltration techniques, but they're designed to counter Coalition technology. They might not be prepared for our approach." "Explain." "Their sensor networks look for energy signatures from alien tech. Our equipment runs so cold it might not register. And their defensive systems are built to stop heavy assault troops, not small infiltration teams." Kane nodded. This was exactly the kind of advantage he had hoped for. The enemy had prepared for a conventional attack by conventional forces. Humanity was anything but conventional. Corporal Martinez approached with his usual grim smile. The explosives expert had volunteered for the mission without hesitation, just like the rest of the team. They all understood what they were walking into. The nebula would try to kill them every second they remained inside it. The Reapers would hunt them with mechanical efficiency. Their chances of survival were minimal. They were going anyway. The briefing room was cramped, filled with 20 of humanity's best soldiers. Kane looked at each face and saw the same expression he felt inside. Determination mixed with acceptance. They knew this mission would likely be their last. They also knew it had to be done. The situation is simple, Kane began. Terminus Station controls the supply routes to 12 coalition worlds. If the Reapers take it, those worlds will fall within months. Every alien military force has declared the mission impossible. Torres spoke up. Good thing we're not aliens. Sir. The comment drew quiet laughter from the team. It was an old joke among the Storm Riders. Whenever other species said something couldn't be done, humans found a way to do it anyway. Kane activated the holographic display showing the nebula. The red mists swirled like a living thing, hiding gravitational traps and radiation storms. We'll enter through the northern approach using the interference to mask our signatures. Once inside, we split into teams. Davis takes reconnaissance, Torres handles demolitions, Martinez secures our exit route. What about support? Asked Private Wilson, the team's medic. There won't be any, Kane replied honestly. Once we're inside the nebula, we're on our own. No reinforcements, no rescue missions. The Coalition fleet will maintain position at the nebula's edge, but they can't follow us in. The room fell silent. Every soldier understood what that meant. If they succeeded, they might still die trapped inside the nebula. If they failed, their bodies would never be recovered. Martinez broke the silence. Sounds like a Tuesday to me. More laughter filled the room. Kane felt a surge of pride for his team. They faced certain death with jokes and determination. This was why humanity had earned its place in the Coalition, despite their primitive technology and short history in space. The Defiant shuddered as it approached the nebula's edge. Through the viewports, the red mists looked beautiful and terrible. Somewhere inside that swirling hell, mechanical killers waited to harvest an entire space station. Every alien species in the galaxy had declared the mission impossible. Time to prove them wrong. The first thing that hit Torres was the smell. Even through her sealed helmet, the nebula's presence felt wrong, like breathing metal shavings mixed with ozone. The Defiant's hull groaned as corrosive gases began their slow work of dissolution. Red mist pressed against the viewports like living blood, pulsing with internal lightning. Hull integrity holding at 96%, reported the ship's pilot. But we're losing about 0.5% every 10 minutes. The aliens weren't exaggerating about the corrosion. Kane watched the external monitors with professional interest. Alien warships needed constant energy shield coverage to survive even brief exposure to the nebula. The Defiant relied on simple metal plating and ceramic coating. It would hold long enough. Lieutenant Davis hunched over his sensor array, trying to pierce the electromagnetic chaos surrounding them. Standard Coalition scanners would be useless. Here, but human technology had been built for harsh environments from the beginning. His equipment gave fuzzy readings, but it was better than the complete blindness that would cripple alien forces. I'm getting intermittent contacts, Davis reported. Terminus Station is approximately 40 kilometers ahead, bearing 027. But there's something else out there. Multiple large signatures moving in formation. Reapers? Has to be. They're using the nebula as cover just like we are. Martinez checked his demolition charges for the third time. The explosive compounds were designed to function in vacuum, extreme heat, and crushing pressure. The nebula would test those limits, but human engineering had always been about making things work in impossible conditions. 2 minutes to drop zone, announced the pilot. Kane activated the team's communication network. 20 soldiers would deploy in 4 teams, each with a specific mission. The electromagnetic interference would disrupt their radios within hours, so they had to work fast. Torres led the first team through the Defiance cargo bay. The outer doors opened with a grinding sound that spoke of metal already beginning to weaken. Beyond lay the void, filled with swirling red mist that seemed to reach toward them with hungry tendrils. The journey to Terminus Station took 8 minutes of EVA flight through conditions that would have killed most aliens in half that time. Radiation meters clicked constantly, measuring levels that required immediate medical attention by Coalition standards. The Storm Riders simply checked their dosimeter badges and kept moving. Terminus Station appeared through the mist like a dead whale floating in bloody water. The massive structure showed signs of Reaper modification already. New antenna arrays sprouted from the hull like metallic cancer. Drilling platforms extended from the station's core, harvesting quantum processors and neural networks. "Jesus Christ," whispered Martinez as they approached the docking bay. "Look at the size of those drilling rigs." The Reaper machines were enormous, each one larger than a Coalition destroyer. They worked with mechanical precision, tearing through the station's defenses like they were paper. Smaller drones swarmed around the drilling platforms, carrying harvested components back to collection points. Davis activated his recording equipment. "Command needs to see this. The Reapers aren't just taking the station, they're rebuilding it into something else." Torres led her team through a maintenance airlock that human engineers had included as a backup system. Coalition designers would have relied on energy barriers and force fields. Humans built physical doors with manual overrides. The simple technology worked perfectly despite the electromagnetic interference. Inside the station, emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red shadows. The artificial gravity worked sporadically, creating zones where debris floated like frozen blood drops. Most of the station's automated systems had been compromised or destroyed, leaving only basic life support in scattered sections. The first body they found was Kalani. The alien's energy suit had protected him from the initial attack, but Reaper hunter drones had torn through his defenses with clinical efficiency. Torres knelt beside the corpse, studying the wound patterns. "They're using some kind of plasma cutter," she reported quietly. "Designed to slice through energy shields and composite armor. Our metal plating might actually fare better." Martinez discovered the station's human contingent barricaded in the engineering section. 12 maintenance workers and 3 security guards had survived by sealing themselves into the most heavily shielded part of the facility. They looked up with desperate hope when the Storm Riders appeared. "Thank God," gasped Chief Engineer Reynolds. "We've been trapped here for 6 hours. The Reapers came out of nowhere, using the nebula to mask their approach. They took out our defenses before we could even send a distress signal." "How many survivors in other sections?" Kane asked. "Unknown. The Reapers are systematically hunting down anyone who might interfere with their operation. They're not interested in prisoners, just eliminating threats." Davis studied the station schematics with Reynolds. The Reaper drilling operation was focused on the central core, where the main quantum processing center was located. They were stealing the station's brain, preparing to install it in their own network. "How long before they finish?" Torres asked. "At their current rate, maybe 8 hours," Reynolds replied. "But once they connect the quantum core to their command network, they'll have access to Coalition navigation data, military codes, everything." Kane felt the familiar cold certainty that came with impossible odds. 8 hours to stop an enemy that had never been defeated. No reinforcements, no support, and working in an environment that was actively trying to kill them. Just another day for the Storm Riders. Martinez rigged shaped charges around the engineering section's blast doors. If the Reapers tried to breach their position, they would get an unpleasant surprise. But the explosions would also bring down this entire section of the station, trapping everyone inside. "Sir," Torres said quietly, studying the tactical situation. "We can't fight them conventionally. They outnumber us 100 to 1. and their technology is designed specifically for this kind of operation. Kane nodded. Direct assault was suicide. But humanity had never won through direct assault anyway. They won through stubbornness, adaptability, and the willingness to use whatever tools came to hand. Davis, what's the Nebula doing to their equipment? The reconnaissance specialist checked his readings. Same as ours. Slow degradation of external systems. But they seem to have better protection. Their drilling rigs are still operating at full efficiency. What about the station itself? How is it handling the exposure? Reynolds answered without hesitation. Badly. The outer hull is already compromised in 17 locations. The thermal vents are backing up because the nebula is interfering with heat dissipation. If this keeps up, we'll have cascade failures throughout the entire structure. Kane smiled grimly. The nebula wasn't just their enemy. It was everyone's enemy. The question was, who could use it more effectively? Aliens saw the hostile environment as an obstacle to overcome. Humans saw it as another weapon. Torres, can you rig the thermal vents? The demolitions expert's scarred face lit up with understanding. You want to turn the station into a pressure cooker. Exactly. If we can redirect the thermal buildup into the Reaper-controlled sections, we might be able to cook them out of there. It'll take time to set up the charges properly, and we'll be working in areas where the hull is already compromised. Kane looked around at his team. Every face showed the same expression, determination mixed with the certain knowledge that they were probably going to die, but they would die fighting, and maybe that would be enough. Martinez, take your team and secure our exit routes. Davis, I need continuous updates on Reaper movements. Torres, you're with me. We're going to make this nebula work for us instead of against us. Gravity failed without warning. Martinez pushed off from a bulkhead as his boots lost contact with the deck plating, drifting into a corridor that had become a three-dimensional maze of floating debris. The station's artificial gravity generators were failing section by section, another casualty of the nebula's relentless assault on anything more complex than basic mechanics. This is actually better, Torres said through the comm, her voice crackling with interference. Easier to move through the thermal vent system without gravity trying to drag us down. She was right, but Martinez knew it also meant the station was dying around them. Each system failure brought them closer to complete structural collapse. The question was whether they could complete their mission before Terminus Station tore itself apart. Kane floated through what had once been the station's primary corridor, now a tunnel filled with sparking cables and twisted metal. The Reapers had carved their way through the superstructure with mechanical precision, leaving behind perfectly circular bore holes that led deeper into the facility's heart. Through one of those holes, he could see the enemy at work. Reaper drones moved with insectile efficiency, dismantling quantum processors and loading them onto transport platforms. The machines showed no concern for the deteriorating environment around them. They simply adapted and continued their harvest. Davis appeared beside him, moving hand over hand along a damaged support beam. I've been monitoring their communications. The Reapers are using a frequency that cuts through the electromagnetic interference. They're coordinating this operation with military precision. Any weaknesses in their network? Maybe. They're relying on line-of-sight communication between units. If we could disrupt that somehow, it might create confusion in their ranks. Kane studied the drilling operation below them. The massive rigs worked in perfect synchronization, each one extracting specific components according to some master plan. But they were also creating structural weak points throughout the station. Every hole they drilled made the entire facility less stable. Torres joined them at the observation point, her demolition pack secured to her back. I've identified 12 critical thermal vents that feed into the Reaper-controlled areas. If we can redirect the pressure buildup, we'll turn those sections into ovens. How long to set the charges? 4 hours minimum. And I'll need to work in areas where the hull integrity is compromised. One wrong move and I'll be sucked out into the nebula. Martinez reported in from the escape route. Path is clear for now, but I'm reading massive structural stress throughout this entire section. We might not have 4 hours before everything comes apart. Kane made the decision that would define the mission. We split up. Torres, take Wilson and Lopez. Set your charges as fast as possible. Davis, monitor Reaper movements and warn us if they detect our activity. Martinez, start rigging the engineering section for emergency decompression. What about you, sir? Kane was already moving toward the central drilling platform. I'm going to have a conversation with our mechanical friends. The journey through the station's damaged superstructure required skills that no alien military academy taught. Kane moved through sections where the artificial atmosphere was leaking into space, where radiation levels would have killed most species in minutes, where gravitational anomalies created zones of crushing force or weightless voids. He had learned these skills in the asteroid belt, where a single mistake meant death in the vacuum. He had refined them in the gas giant storms of Jupiter's upper atmosphere, where pressure and temperature could change instantly without warning. Every harsh environment humanity had conquered had prepared him for this moment. The Reaper command drone was larger than the others, distinguished by additional sensor arrays and communication equipment. It directed the drilling operation from a platform suspended above the station's quantum core, surrounded by a dozen smaller units that responded to its transmitted orders. Kane attached his improvised explosive to the platform's primary support strut. The bomb was simple: chemical explosives wrapped around a metal fragment, designed to create maximum shrapnel in the weightless environment. No energy signature to detect, no electronic components to fail. The explosion was beautiful in its simplicity. Metal fragments tore through the command drone's delicate sensor arrays, severing communication links and sending the unit spinning into the station's superstructure. The smaller drones immediately stopped their coordinated work, reverting to individual programming without central guidance. Chaos spread through the Reaper operation like wildfire. Without their command network, the machines began making decisions independently. Some continued drilling in areas that were no longer structurally sound. Others attempted to establish new communication links, abandoning their assigned tasks. A few began attacking perceived threats, including other Reaper units. Torres felt the vibration through the hull plating as she worked in the thermal management section. The Reapers were fighting each other now, their weapons fire adding new damage to an already compromised structure. Her demolition charges were almost ready, but the increasing chaos made her work more dangerous. A hull breach opened 2 meters from her position, venting atmosphere into the nebula with a sound like screaming metal. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, but not before she caught a glimpse of the void beyond. Red mist swirled with hungry intelligence, waiting to devour anything that crossed its threshold. Wilson helped her secure the final charge to a thermal coupling that was already glowing red with backed-up heat. "This whole section is about to blow," he warned. "The pressure buildup is beyond critical levels." "That's the idea," Torres replied grimly. "When these charges detonate, all that thermal energy is going to redirect straight into the areas where the Reapers are working." Davis watched the enemy response from his monitoring position. The loss of their command network had created exploitable confusion, but it was also making the Reapers more unpredictable. Some units had begun hunting for the source of the sabotage, moving through the station with deadly purpose. "Commander, we've got hunter-killers moving toward Torres' position. 3 units, heavily armed, using thermal sensors to track movement." Kane was already moving, pulling himself hand over hand through a maintenance tunnel that ran parallel to the thermal management section. The Reaper hunters were designed to eliminate organic threats with overwhelming firepower, but they had never encountered humans before. Their targeting systems looked for the energy signatures of alien equipment and the biological markers of known coalition species. Human soldiers ran cold and quiet, using simple equipment that barely registered. On sophisticated sensors, Kane moved through the station like a ghost, invisible to machines that could track a Kalani warrior from kilometers away. The first hunter-killer died to a shaped charge attached to a structural beam above its position. The explosion brought down half a corridor, crushing the machine under tons of twisted metal. The second unit detected the blast and moved to investigate, walking directly into Martinez's improvised minefield. The third hunter-killer was smarter. It approached Torres's position carefully, using cover and scanning for threats. Its thermal sensors detected the heat signature of working humans, and its targeting systems locked onto vital areas with mechanical precision. Kane killed it with a crowbar and human stubbornness. The improvised weapon punched through the machine's sensor array, blinding it long enough for him to plant an explosive charge directly against its power core. The resulting explosion left nothing but scattered debris and the smell of burned. Electronics Torres activated the final thermal charge with 30 seconds to spare. Throughout the Reaper-controlled sections, redirected heat began building to lethal levels. The machines had been designed to operate in space, where waste heat could be radiated away efficiently. In the confines of a space station, with the thermal management system turned against them, they faced temperatures that would melt their internal components. The Reapers tried to adapt, but adaptation took time they didn't have. One by one, drilling rigs began shutting down as their operators succumbed to thermal overload. The quantum processor harvest ground to a halt as transport drones malfunctioned in the rising heat. Martinez watched from the engineering section, as sections of the station began tearing themselves apart. The combination of structural damage, gravitational stress, and thermal overload was creating a cascade failure that would soon destroy the entire facility. "Sir, we need to evacuate now. This whole place is coming down." Kane made a decision that surprised even his veteran team. "Negative. We're not done yet." The station screamed. Metal shrieked against metal as gravitational shears twisted the superstructure beyond its design limits. Torres found herself cut off from the main team when a corridor collapsed, sealing her in a section where the hull was dissolving faster than the emergency repair systems could compensate. Emergency lighting had failed completely. She worked by the glow of her helmet lamps, watching nebular gases seep through microscopic cracks in the bulkhead. The corrosive mist would eat through her suit seals within minutes if the concentration increased much more. "Torres, report." Kane's voice crackled through the failing communication system. "Trapped in Section 7 Alpha. Hull breach imminent. But I've got eyes on something you need to know about." She directed her helmet camera toward the observation port, where Reaper activity continued despite the thermal assault. "They're not just harvesting the quantum processors. They're installing something." Through the reinforced transparent aluminum, she could see machines working with desperate efficiency around a device that hurt to look at directly. The object seemed to bend light around itself, creating distortions that made her eyes water. Whatever it was, the Reapers considered it worth risking their entire operation to install. Davis received the transmitted images at his monitoring station and felt his blood turn cold. "Commander, that's not standard Reaper technology. The energy readings are off the charts. I think they're trying to weaponize the nebula itself." Kane pushed through a maintenance shaft that was rapidly filling with superheated gas. The thermal redirects were working better than expected, turning entire sections of the station into ovens. But the Reapers had adapted faster than anticipated, sealing themselves into protective zones while they completed their mysterious project. Martinez fought his way through the engineering section as gravity generators failed in sequence. Without artificial gravity, every loose object had become a projectile. Debris flew through the corridors like shrapnel, driven by pressure differentials and electromagnetic fields. "The quantum core is destabilizing," Chief Engineer Reynolds reported from the emergency shelter. "Whatever they're doing to it, it's creating feedback loops throughout the entire power grid. If this keeps up, we'll have a cascade failure that could tear a hole in space-time itself." The words hit Kane like a physical blow. A cascade failure in the quantum core wouldn't just destroy the station, it would create a dimensional rift that could destabilize the entire nebula. With the right modifications, such a rift could be turned into a weapon capable of destroying entire star systems. Torres watched through the observation port as the strange device began to glow with inner fire. The Reaper machines working around it moved with frantic urgency, racing to complete their installation before the thermal overload could destroy them. She realized with growing horror that they were willing to sacrifice themselves to complete the project. "The hull's giving way," she reported calmly, watching cracks spread across the bulkhead like a spider web. "I've got maybe 2 minutes before this section depressurizes completely." Kane made a decision that went against every tactical principle he had ever learned. Instead of retreating, he ordered his team deeper into the dying station. "Davis, get to the quantum core. I need you to document everything the Reapers are doing." "There! Martinez, take Wilson and Lopez and secure the approaches to Section 7 Alpha. Torres is going to need an extraction route." "Sir, the structural integrity is failing everywhere. We'll be lucky to make it through the next 10 minutes. Then we better work fast." Davis fought his way through corridors where the artificial atmosphere was being replaced by nebular gases. His breathing apparatus filtered out the worst of the corrosive elements, but he could feel the acidic mist beginning to eat through his equipment. The reconnaissance specialist had survived chemical weapons attacks and biological warfare, but the nebula was worse than either. The quantum core chamber was a vision from hell. Reaper machines worked in temperatures that should have melted their components, driven by programming that valued mission completion above self-preservation. The strange device they were installing pulsed with energy that seemed to exist in dimensions beyond normal space. Davis activated his recording equipment and transmitted everything back to the Coalition fleet. If his team didn't survive, at least Command would know what they were facing. The Reapers weren't just building a weapon, they were creating a tool that could turn the galaxy's most dangerous regions into instruments of conquest. Torres felt the hull give way with a sound like thunder. Atmosphere rushed out into the nebula, carrying with it debris, equipment, and anything not secured to the deck. She managed to grab a support beam as the decompression tried to pull her into the void. Through the growing breach, she could see the nebula's true nature. The red mist didn't just drift randomly, it moved with purpose, reaching toward the station like hungry tentacles. Whatever intelligence guided the phenomenon seemed aware of the events unfolding inside Terminus Station. Martinez arrived at her, positioned with Wilson and Lopez just as the emergency bulkheads began to fail. The three soldiers formed a human chain, pulling Torres away from the expanding breach even as the corridor around them disintegrated. "The extraction routes compromised," Martinez reported grimly. "We'll have to go through the central core to reach the escape pods." Kane acknowledged the report while fighting his way toward the Reaper installation. The strange device was nearly complete now, its energy patterns synchronizing with the quantum core's fluctuations. Whatever the machines were building, it was almost ready to activate. The first Reaper unit he encountered was already dying from thermal overload, its movements jerky and uncoordinated. Kane put it out of its misery with a thermite charge that melted through its armor plating like butter. The explosion lit up the corridor with white-hot fire. More machines appeared, hunter-killers that had somehow survived the thermal assault. Their weapon systems were damaged but still functional, filling the air with energy blasts that turned the metal walls cherry red. Kane fought them with improvised weapons and desperate courage, using the station's collapsing superstructure as cover. Torres and her extraction team reached the quantum core chamber just as the Reaper installation reached critical activation levels. The strange device had grown to encompass most of the core assembly, its impossible geometries twisting reality around it like a living thing. "My God," whispered Wilson, staring at readings that shouldn't exist. "It's not just weaponizing. The nebula. It's teaching the nebula to weaponize itself." The implications hit them all at once. The red mist that surrounded them wasn't just a natural phenomenon. It was something alive, something intelligent, something that could be directed and controlled. The Reapers had found a way to turn an entire nebula into a weapon that could move between star systems, consuming everything in its path. Davis transmitted his final report as the quantum core began its terminal overload sequence. Command, the Reapers have created a symbiotic weapons system. They're giving the nebula intelligence and mobility in exchange for unlimited destructive potential. If this thing activates, it could consume the entire coalition. Kane reached the installation just as the device achieved full synchronization with the quantum core. Energy patterns beyond human understanding flowed between the artificial construct and the station's power systems. Around them, the nebula began to pulse with new awareness. The time for subtle tactics had passed. Kane armed every explosive he carried and prepared for a suicide run against the Reaper installation. But before he could move, Torres appeared beside him. "Thought you might need some help with the demolition work," she said calmly. "Her own explosives. Ready." Martinez arrived with Wilson and Lopez, each carrying enough charges to level a city block. Davis joined them from his monitoring position, adding his equipment to the growing pile of improvised weapons. The Storm Riders stood together in the dying station, surrounded by enemies and impossible odds. They had come to stop a harvesting operation and discovered something far worse. Now they faced a choice that would define not just their own fate, but the future of every living thing in the galaxy. Kane looked at his team and saw the same expression he felt inside, determination mixed with peace. They knew what had to be done. They knew it would kill them all. They were going to do it anyway. Time moved like thick honey in the quantum core chamber. The Reaper installation had achieved full activation, its impossible geometries warping space-time around the pulsing heart of Terminus Station. Reality bent and twisted as the device established its connection with the nebula's alien intelligence, preparing to birth a weapon that could devour galaxies. Kane felt the weight of every decision that had led to this moment. The mission had evolved far beyond its original scope, but the principle remained the same. Sometimes the only way to save everything was to sacrifice yourself doing it. "Torres, how long do you need to place the charges?" The demolitions expert was already moving, her scarred hands working with practiced efficiency despite the radiation levels that should have killed her hours ago. 90 seconds to position everything. Another 30 to arm the sequence. After that, we'll have maybe 10 seconds before this whole section turns into a star. Martinez took position near the chamber's main entrance, his weapon trained on the corridor beyond. Reaper hunter-killers were converging on their position, drawn by the energy signatures of the human equipment. "Company coming, sir. Looks like everything left operational is heading our way." Davis monitored the installation's energy patterns, while Wilson and Lopez set up a defensive perimeter. The strange device was drawing power from the quantum core at an exponential rate, feeding that energy directly into the nebula's consciousness. With each passing second, the red mist outside grew more organized, more purposeful. The nebula's learning, Davis reported with scientific fascination that overcame his terror. It's absorbing information from the quantum core, navigation data, star charts, tactical information about coalition defenses. When this thing fully activates, it'll know exactly where to strike. Kane armed his personal charges and moved toward the installation's central column. The device hurt to look at directly, its surfaces reflecting light that didn't exist and casting shadows that fell upward. Getting close enough to plant explosives would mean exposure to energies that would probably kill him before he could complete the task. Torres finished positioning her charges around the installation's support structure. Each explosive had been carefully placed to maximize structural damage, but the device's reality-warping field made conventional demolitions unreliable. Charges set, but I can't guarantee they'll work normally in this environment. The first wave of hunter-killers reached Martinez's position, their weapons blazing with desperate fury. The machines fought with mechanical precision, but they were damaged and operating beyond their design parameters. Martinez held them back with concentrated firepower and human stubbornness, his simple projectile weapons punching through armor that energy blasts couldn't penetrate. Wilson fell to a Reaper plasma cutter that sliced through his chest armor like paper. Lopez died seconds later when a hunter-killer's self-destruct charge tore apart the defensive position. But their sacrifice bought precious time for Torres to complete her work. Kane reached the installation's central core as the device, achieved critical resonance with the nebula. Energy patterns flowed between dimensions, carrying information and consciousness across impossible distances. The red mist beyond the chamber walls pulsed with new intelligence, already beginning to probe the boundaries of its containment. The radiation levels at the core were lethal. Kane felt his skin burning even through his protective suit as he attached the final charges to the device's central column. His hands moved automatically, following procedures drilled into him through years of impossible missions. The explosives were simple chemical compounds, immune to the exotic energies that surrounded him. Davis maintained his monitoring station even as his equipment began to fail. Energy cascade is reaching critical mass. When this thing fully activates, it'll create a dimensional tunnel that connects directly to Coalition space. The nebula will be able to appear anywhere in the galaxy instantly. Torres armed the detonation, sequence with hands that shook from radiation poisoning. Her scarred face was pale but determined as she checked each connection twice. Sequence armed. Manual detonation in 60 seconds, or remote trigger on command. Martinez fell back from the entrance as more hunter-killers poured into the chamber. His ammunition was running low and the machines were adapting to his tactics with mechanical efficiency. "Sir, I can't hold them much longer." Kane looked around the chamber one final time, memorizing the faces of the people who had followed him into hell. Torres with her demolition expertise and dry humor, Davis with his scientific curiosity that overcame fear, Martinez with his unshakable loyalty and grim smile. Wilson and Lopez already fallen but not forgotten. "This is Commander Kane to all Storm Riders. It's been an honor serving with you." The installation reached full activation just as Kane triggered the detonation sequence. The explosion that followed existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, tearing through reality itself as it consumed the Reaper device. The quantum core's energy discharge created a brief star in the heart of Terminus Station, burning with the light of human determination. But the victory came at a cost measured in more than lives. The explosion destabilized the entire station, creating gravitational anomalies that would prevent any rescue mission. The Storm Riders had succeeded in preventing the nebula weapon, but they would never leave the red mist alive. Torres felt the deck plating buckle beneath her feet as the quantum explosion propagated through the station's superstructure. Emergency. Bulkheads failed in sequence, unable to contain the energies unleashed by the device's destruction. She smiled grimly as the ceiling began to collapse, satisfied that her charges had done their job. Davis transmitted his final report even as his monitoring equipment overloaded and caught fire. "Command, weapon neutralized. Repeat, nebula weapon neutralized. The Reaper's installation has been destroyed, but—" His voice was cut off as the chamber's communication arrays melted under the intense radiation. Martinez emptied his last magazine into a hunter-killer that was already dying from the quantum explosion's aftereffects. The machine toppled backward, its systems failing as exotic energies coursed through its circuitry. He looked around the devastated chamber and nodded with satisfaction. The job was done. Kane felt the explosion's heat wash over him as he was thrown against the chamber wall. His vision dimmed as radiation sickness and physical trauma overwhelmed his body's defenses. But he remained conscious long enough to see the installation's complete destruction, its impossible geometries collapsing back into normal space-time. The nebula screamed. Across the Crimson Nebula's entire volume, the alien intelligence felt the severing of its connection to the quantum core. The red mist convulsed with rage and frustration as its chance for galactic conquest died with the human soldiers who had made the ultimate sacrifice. Admiral Thane watched from the Coalition fleet as Terminus Station died in fire and radiation. Long-range sensors detected the quantum explosion's signature, followed by the complete collapse of the station's superstructure. Emergency transponders went silent one by one until only empty space remained where humanity's elite had made their stand. "Status of the Storm Riders?" Thane asked quietly. "No response from any units, sir. The quantum explosion created too much interference for our sensors to penetrate. But—" The sensor technician hesitated. "Sir, the nebula's behavior has changed. The organized patterns we detected earlier are breaking down. Whatever the humans did, it worked." General Rivera stood at the observation deck, watching the red mist begin to disperse into its natural chaotic patterns. The alien intelligence that had briefly stirred within the nebula was gone, severed from its artificial enhancement by human courage and explosive demolition charges. "They knew they weren't coming back," she said quietly. Admiral Thane's 4 arms trembled with grief and admiration. "General, I owe your species an apology. I thought your technology was primitive, your methods crude." "They were," Rivera replied. "But sometimes crude methods work when sophisticated ones fail. Sometimes the simplest solution is the right one." The memorial service was held 3 days later aboard the Coalition flagship. Representatives from every member species attended, honoring the human soldiers who had died to save worlds they had never seen, protecting people they had never met. Admiral Thane delivered the eulogy with words that would be remembered for generations. "Today we honor 20 human soldiers who faced impossible odds and achieved impossible victory. Other species looked at the Crimson Nebula and saw certain death. Humanity looked at it and saw another Tuesday." The phrase became legend throughout Coalition space. Whenever military planners faced missions that seemed impossible, whenever conventional forces declared situations hopeless, the same recommendation appeared in tactical reports across the galaxy: send the humans. Not because they were expendable, but because when the universe itself became the enemy, humanity possessed something that no amount of advanced technology could replicate. They possessed the stubborn refusal to accept defeat, the willingness to adapt to any environment, and the courage to sacrifice everything for the greater good. The Crimson Nebula still existed, but it was just a nebula now, beautiful, dangerous, but no longer capable of conscious malevolence. Ships that entered its boundaries faced natural hazards instead of intelligent opposition. The red mist that had once pulsed with alien awareness now drifted according to simple physics. In the depths of space where Terminus Station once stood, a small memorial beacon broadcast a simple message on all frequencies. 20 names. 20 humans who had given their lives so that others might live. The beacon was built to last 1,000 years, ensuring that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. But across Coalition space, their real memorial was something far more valuable. It was the knowledge that when everything seemed lost, when the enemy appeared unstoppable, when conventional wisdom declared defeat inevitable, there was still hope. Sometimes that hope wore a human face and carried simple weapons into impossible battles. Sometimes that hope was willing to pay the ultimate price for victory, and sometimes that hope was enough to save the galaxy,